Welcome to the Imposter Syndrome Club. My name is Jessamy G. I'm joined as always by my co-host Alice Eadie. Welcome, Alice.
Hello, Jess.
And today we are joined by our beautiful guest, Miss Annie Carter, owner and director of Eve's Studio. Welcome, Annie.
Thank you very much. So good to be here.
Oh, it's so good to have you. I've been trying not to ask you too many questions as we've been setting up because I'm like, this is all content.
Don't waste conversation on
fuck
real
conversation.
life.
Friendship, what? It's so good to have you here. We're both massive fans amongst many. You do many things, but Annie has a beautiful podcast called Yes You, and personally it's been like an anchor point for me over the past year. It's incredible. You're very wise and very eloquent, and so thank you for that as well.
Oh, thanks so much. That's really lovely.
So, Annie, the way this podcast starts is that we ask our guests to read their own bio in the most brutal of fashions. So would you indulge us, please?
I will. And yes, that is brutal. When Alice mentioned that that's what we'd be doing, I went to go look for my bio and realised it's been a while since I've had to give someone my bio, and then was like, oh, it's always such a painful thing to like update your bio. And so I was like, I'm not going to do it just for this. Sorry. not just for this.
Fair.
But
Nope, we haven't even updated our bios for this. So
yeah, okay. Well, there you go. But then I do have my website, which has like a very long description about me, but also on the front page of my website, when I was putting it together, I was like, I'm just going to have some words that kind of capture who I am. And so I'm going to read you those words.
Beautiful.
Which
Love
feels
it.
equally as brutal.
Yes.
I think that means we're doing it right.
Yeah.
That's part of what this is.
Okay, great. All right. Well, let me just read the collection of words that are on my website. With a photo of me. It says woman, creatrix, believer, learner, leader, feminist, space holder, business owner, lover, pioneer, teacher, mentor, relentless optimist. And then when I had written all that, I was kind of like, yeah, that's me. But then I also looked at it and was like, but none of that, like that's not me. Like it's kind of like it's all true, but it's also that doesn't capture who I am. And so at the bottom of all of that, there is written all of this and none of this. Because I'm kind of because it's sort of how I feel about all of that. Like it's like, yeah, it's all true, but also I am kind of someone beyond all of that. Like none of those titles kind of fully define who I am, but they are also important.
How did you come up with that list of words?
Just by sitting in pandemic times, making my website, I think, and just, probably writing a lot more words than that and then kind of going what feels most true and what felt like it wasn't completely, just repeating myself.
And what about, sorry to cut you off, but and what about the order? Because I would imagine, I noticed that business owner came after, it was definitely the second half, which, I mean, that might just, you've got to pick an order, things can't all be the first thing. But how did you think about what came first and
Yeah, well, to be honest, some of that was about the aesthetic, the graphic layout of it.
Oh, you don't have to convince us.
Oh, yeah.
That's totally legit.
So that was definitely at play. And actually business owner wasn't in there. I put that in a while later, which is strange because obviously, well, for me, business owner is a very key part of the role that I play in the world at the moment, what I do. But I guess in some ways compared to some of the other words, that feels more like a function or something that I perform, whereas the others felt a little bit more sort of like what I'm about or who I am.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. It's interesting hearing the way that idea of all of this and none of this, which I love. And it brings to mind almost like a like a network of things, of like little nodes, and each one of those is like this little node, but it's like they connect up in a web or like an ecosystem, but the identity is like the movement between these things. It's like it's that constant movement that creates the thing that's bigger than all of them.
That's a beautiful description of it.
I think that's such a powerful, like I'm so excited to go write my own list now because I felt quite stuck for a while, and I think that's a really powerful way of like not choosing one descriptor but kind of working out what those little nodes are for all of that. I love that.
Cool.
Yeah.
What's a creatrix?
Yeah, it sounds a bit fancy, doesn't it?
Sexy.
Yeah. I'm like,
Cool. Can we be one?
Yes.
Cool.
I think you are one. A creatrix is a woman creator, basically, someone who creates things, who is, woman.
Yeah,
I love
amazing.
that.
And so woman was the first word on your list and creatrix following that. So, and you've really spent your career, or at least the part of it that I'm aware of, working for women, building spaces for women, centered around women. So Alice and I are very familiar with Eve's studio, but for the benefit of our listeners, maybe you could give us a little bit of background to that, or maybe even what you were doing before that. No, let's start with Eve, and then we'll go back to birth.
Okay, no worries. We'll work back. Whoa, settle in.
How much time you got, Annie?
Okay, so Eve is a space for women and for non-binary people as well, and we. It's basically, there are 2 studios, and it's really focused around movement. And so there are lots of classes in the studios. Yoga for me is really central, being it's not just a type of movement, but it's a whole philosophy, a whole way of being, which I kind of see across the whole studio. And then there's all the different other things in terms of movement. We have dance classes, we have Pilates, we have fitness classes, strength training, all of those different things, and very much a community focus. And it really is an important part of it is the women-centered focus. So it's one of those things that actually a lot of people who come to Eve, I hear it all the time, people come that didn't know that it mattered to them to be in a space that was for women, but actually it turns out it really matters to them after having experienced it. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so I first found you, Annie, and Eve many years ago in your first studio in Thornbury on High Street when it was what's now Think Thornbury, I think, for people who are Thornbury familiar, in a little studio there. And so to see that sort of progression to move to a new bigger studio and then open the second studio has just been so glorious to watch. And without making it about me,
Go on.
I've never actually had the opportunity to sit down and thank you and say how grateful I am to you for creating this space, because really that was the start of my sort of journey into health and fitness, really. Like I'd done a little bit of yoga before. I was saying to Alice before you got here, I'd done, the odd like Les Mills pump class at a Globo gym or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was necessarily being women-centered, but certainly being community-centered for me was completely game-changing, to have a space that felt like home, to have a community of people that you then, there are relationships that I developed at Eve all of those years back at the first studio that I still have now. Wow. And it sort of started me on I did my first ever run challenge there, which was my first 10Ks, and now I'm about to run my 3rd marathon,
Amazing.
So these sort of doors that you are able to open for people by giving them sort of like a warm on-ramp, and you could be coming into it from any skill level or experience or whatever, but that was certainly my experience, that it was like a warm hug and a gentle guiding hand to this thing for me, who was like, I'm the artsy girl. I'm not the gym girl. I'm not a fitness person. That seems like scary and terrifying, and it's for someone else. So firstly, thank you. I owe I owe a lot to you actually and to
Aw.
Eve. So I feel incredibly grateful to have gotten that. It was a fly in my letterbox.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's how I
Isn't
found
that
you guys.
amazing?
Yeah, and here we are.
Aw.
But I'm interested as well because, the very loose premise of this podcast is around imposter syndrome. And I was thinking about this today, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about your own experience of it, but it occurred to me that you are sort of potentially a facilitator of getting people out of that fixed mindset or that potential imposter syndrome that people might experience coming into a gym for the first time, where they think maybe this is an environment that will suit me or fit me, or I'm not that person. Is that something you feel you've seen in the community of women that have come through the studio?
Absolutely, yes. And first of all, thank you so much for all of those kind words and for being part of it. It's so beautiful to think back to knowing you in those early days, and like dancing with you upstairs in the tiny little space, and then fitness classes, and then everything that you're describing. And then like in terms of fitness, I just feel like you've just left us in the dust. I'm like, woo, try and keep up with Jess now. But yes, absolutely. And I love that you just said that it's like a warm hug. And literally yesterday, someone after my class said that. She was like, that felt like a warm hug, and this space feels like a warm hug. And I'm like, oh, like it's beautiful to hear those things fed back, where it's like, well, that's exactly what we're trying to create here. And so it means so much when their experience is that. It's not just that they read their flyer, this will be a warm hug, a warm hug, and they go, okay, like if it feels that way. But yeah, definitely, I think we have a lot of people come into Eve who don't feel comfortable in other spaces, yoga studios, dance studios, fitness, gyms, all of that. And come in with some real trepidation, and definitely with that sense of like, I'm not supposed to be here. And I love that it actually is a space where I think a lot of the time people do end up feeling comfortable and welcome. And then like once they kind of get that, they can then start to enjoy themselves and start to enjoy moving their bodies. And because I guess once you kind of can peel away that focus of it has to look like this, or you have to be able to do this, that, or the other, then it starts to be, well, doesn't it feel amazing to move your body? And doesn't it isn't it cool to explore different types of movement and find what works for you? Like, I love that aspect of it.
I think hearing you describe the space like that, it kind of is making me think of how you start off by creating a physical space that is welcoming to people. But for a lot of people in that space, and again, I'm also someone who never identified as like an active person or a sporty person, and has very much found that later in life. Mm-hmm. And that idea of imposter syndrome firstly operates definitely for me the first few times I was ever in gyms or yoga studios or whatever, but also in a kind of a deeper way, it felt like that within my own body. And I think until finding yoga, where you suddenly are allowed to inhabit your own cells and allowed to inhabit your own body and kind of like play in that space, just that idea that like there are whole kind of lives that you could live without ever getting that, like without ever feeling welcome in your own cells. And
totally.
It's such a, could you maybe chat more around the idea of embodiment, or like what that can mean?
Yeah, sure. Well, as you shared that, I think of the words that we have at the front of both of our studios on the wall, which say, "You are so welcome here exactly as you are. We love you already." And when we're opening the second studio, I was just like, in the lead up to it, I was like, I have to have these words on the wall, and they need to be the first thing that people see when they come in. And for me, it's really significant the way that both of our studios have turned out to be. When you come in the door, you see these words before you actually kind of get in, and also you'll see these words before we as a team will see you. And so for me, it's just it's like this statement that's welcoming people and saying we already accept you, we already love you. And that is all goes before we even see what you look like, before we know anything about you. It's like a commitment that we're making. You're welcome already. And so that's like part of what Eve is about. And it's like anyone who signs up to be on our team, that's what they're signing up to, is to treating people like that. But all of that to say that I think ultimately what I hope happens is that people start to embody that in themselves. And I think I've talked about it on my podcast and at different times, the idea of almost like we need that sign like over our beds in the morning. So it's a message that we're speaking to ourselves. You are so welcome here. Yeah. I love you already, like exactly as you are. Because I think, we can, we end up apologizing for ourselves a lot. That definitely shows up in a sense of disconnect from our bodies. Like, who am I to actually fully be in this body and to move this body? And I mean, I see it like in, say, run challenges especially when you've got people who are starting to run for the first time, and literally it's like they will run like with their arms kind of across their body. It's like people won't want to just like swing their arms. And sometimes that's just because they haven't got a sports bra yet and they need to actually like get their boobs under control. Yeah. But also I think because sometimes it's people just going like, if I swing my arms while I do this action of like moving my feet a bit faster than a walk, like that's kind of owning that I am running right now. Like I'm a runner. And a lot of people kind of feel like, no, I can't claim that, or like some sort of resistance to just owning that for what it is. And I think that there's just something really powerful in, just learning to swing your arms like in a run and that in all of the other ways as well, like to fully be there in this body that you have, like move it and be present. I think it's a pretty powerful thing.
That is so interesting to me. I'd never really thought of it like that, but I can definitely, like if I picture baby Jessamy in my mind's eye, like going for first ever run maybe, it's almost like I'm embarrassed to move my body in that way, because like what if someone sees me and they think that I'm a runner? How embarrassing.
That's it.
Totally. And like in your mind you're like, I'll wait till I'm good. And when I'm good, then I can run like a runner. Like then I've earned the right to take myself seriously or enjoy this.
But you have to, like, in order to be able to run, you have to, so it's like what comes first. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Annie, but you're a singer as well. Do I remember that right?
Little bit.
Yeah.
I won't make you sing. It didn't make the list on the website, so not that level.
I only ask in the sense that I think it may be a sort of similar thing with singing, in that I've heard a lot of people's issue with singing is because they don't open their mouth wide enough for the sound to come out, particularly Australians, because we tend to be mumblers, so we keep our mouths quite closed.
Yeah.
And I think it might come from the same place, like, but if I open my mouth really wide, I'm going to look like I'm trying to sing properly, and what a dickhead. Like everyone's going to think that I'm singing. You know, it's such a vicious cycle, isn't it? Shame.
And how much, like, you just wonder, like, what does that hold us back from? Like, what do we not do because we think they think we'll think that we think we're, you know.
They're not even fucking thinking. They're so busy like doing whatever they're doing.
Yeah, they're thinking about you thinking about them thinking that there's something else. Yeah, exactly.
That's so true. I noticed this thing. So I've been dating someone who's amazing at playing guitar, and we've had a few times where he'll play something and I'll kind of like sing along. It's so fun. And I'm not in any way a singer. I can't sing, but that's okay. I'm enthusiastic. And it's I love that it kind of creates a safe enough space. And I think it's so beautiful feeling safe enough that you can be bad at a thing with someone. But I definitely noticed a few times where we'd be singing something and I'm like, oh my God, I was singing that in my car, like getting it way better. Like I'll never be a professional, but I was like, I was hitting those fucking notes. And then with the person missing it and realizing exactly that, it was because there was just a 20% like just 20% holding back a bit, like not wanting to kind of like try for it and miss it and be embarrassed by missing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I think is the whole thing of everything, isn't it? Like if I don't try, I won't miss it and then I'll never know, and I'd prefer that than missing it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
So tell me a bit, Annie, before you opened Eve, because one thing that strikes me through the different venues and the multiple studios, the tone of the place has remained the same throughout. So I feel like you must have gone into it with a really clear intention of the type of space and the type of business that you wanted to create. So I'd love to hear a bit more about like your background pre-Eve and why you decided to start it, and a little bit about the story of its birth, its origin story, if you will.
Sure. Yeah, so my background pre-Eve was in community services. So for the 5 or so years before I started Eve, I was I was working for a community service organisation, managing a bunch of social workers and employment services workers and, all sorts of things across a range of different programs. And so, have really always had that community aspect. Prior to that, I was a youth worker. So, have always had the sort of people side of things. And in earlier life, church and like Christian community was like really significant for me. It's something I kind of moved away from later on in my life, but was really, really a huge part. And I feel like that has definitely kind of seeped into what I do and the way that even Eve is set up. In some ways it's kind of like church
Totally.
without the religious aspect and without the really strong doctrine on any particular thing other than that you're okay as you are and come and be you. So definitely that the community side really matters to me. And I think if that wasn't part of it, I don't think I'd be as excited about it. And even at different times, people will say, oh, you should open a studio here or open a studio there. And some of the places that people suggest, I just straight away, like say, for instance, Bali or like Byron Bay or something, places which are beautiful and in some ways it's like, my gosh, that would be a dream to have a space there, but that are also quite transient in terms of the community that comes through there. And for me, it's like, I don't want to just be running a bunch of classes for people to come and just do and move on. It's actually about the opportunity for connection and and really that's a big part of how Eve came to be. For me, while I was in that work, I was a member of a yoga studio. I also was doing some dance classes at another place. I also had a gym membership and I was kind of going to all of them, doing the different things, and was just really aware that each of them had this huge potential for connection and community, but I kind of was missing it because I was spread between them all. And also when I had times, like I remember I injured my shoulder and that just meant I just stopped going to the yoga studio for a while. And so therefore any kind of sense of the community that I had there just evaporated because of this injury. And so that was part of the dreaming up of Eve, was like, what if there was a space where you could do all of those different types of movement in the one space, and where if you're injured and a particular type of movement doesn't work for you for a while, then you could still do something else. And same then if different seasons in life, like you are more or less busy or have more or less energy or you're pregnant or whatever it might be, that there was still something that you could do movement-wise in this space that meant it made sense for you to keep coming along, and so therefore could continue to be part of the community. And that was kind of the beginning of the dream of it, which at the time, I was like, why aren't people doing this? Like, why is that not a thing out there? And at the time it really was pretty unique. And I think in some ways it is still unique, but since then I think that more spaces are adding different modalities and things to, like a lot of yoga studios are now adding Pilates, or gyms are adding in yoga or things like that. I think people are sort of offering a more diverse range of classes. But
how did you know when it was time? Like when the idea had been gestating for a while, like how did you know?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I know about myself that I have ideas, and I dream up things, and I let them be for a while. I know not to jump too quickly. And with that one, I just let it be. And I guess how I knew was that it just got stronger and stronger and stronger. I got more excited about the idea. I literally was finding myself like lying awake in bed going,
I love
like
that
3 in the
feeling.
morning.
That like sparkly, bubbly feeling of yes.
It's like having a crush on someone. But
Yes, on your own idea. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. It's the best feeling, isn't it? And yes, and I know for me, because sometimes ideas will come and then they will just sort of dissipate and be like, oh yeah, I was thinking about opening that tea house back then, or whatever the thing might be. But yeah, for this one, it felt more and more inspiring and exciting to me. And then on a practical level, I actually thought that I would kind of ease from my other job into starting the business. And so I was starting to kind of put together a business plan for Eve and things like that. But as it turned out, my other work was so consuming. It was a really full-on job. I was sort of working overtime all the time, and was just like, this is not going to work. I can't do both. And so at some point just was like, okay, I'll just draw the line and jump from that and move into Eve. And even that, I thought that I was going to start by doing things in a park or something like that, and then found the space, and just kind of was like, all right, let's just do it. So jumped in.
There's definitely something to be said, and we've spoken about this a little bit, that moment of like just taking the leap, because you can never be entirely sure. Like you could have kept your job and done 3 days a week of classes in a park, but the timeline might then be pushed out so far.
Yeah.
However, like that, for me, doing that leap from like having a part-time job to doing this, the stakes were pretty low. Like I need a computer and a pen to do my job, right? I didn't have to get a lease and buy equipment and all of that sort of stuff. So I imagine you really have to be backing yourself, and have quite a lot of confidence that this is going to work, because you're investing what I imagine wouldn't have been a small amount of money into getting it off the ground.
Yeah.
How was that? Frightening, exciting? Do you remember that time?
I do, yeah. And it's funny, like when you say that, it's like, yeah, that sounds like a crazy idea, like a ridiculous idea. What was I thinking? But I mean, there was some trepidation, but also I do, as in my list of words from my website, I am a bit of a relentless optimist. Like I do just tend to kind of assume this will go well. I'll be pretty good at this, I think. And it is definitely not always the case. But I start from that place. And I guess on a practical level, like I knew that I can work hard when I need to work hard, and I knew I had a fair bit of experience. Oh, yeah, I guess what I didn't say before in terms of my background, like in the community services space, particularly in the role that I was in before, directly before opening Eve, I was running pretty huge projects and programs and things and managing like really big budgets. And so it was almost like a bunch of different small businesses that I was overseeing and responsible for, and had directed an organisation, a not-for-profit organisation before that. And so, yeah, had kind of had lots of the different bits and pieces that would be useful skills and experience. But at the same time, it definitely was a leap, and it could have really gone south, I guess. But I don't remember really imagining that as a possibility. Definitely once we were into it, and there was times where I was like, I don't know if I can pay the rent or pay the team or things like that. I definitely then had moments of like, I'm not sure this is going to be okay. But I think at this point, nearly 9 years in, I think we're doing okay. Yeah.
So thinking about that past experience, and this partially answers what I wanted to ask you, but maybe you can expand on it, is I know when I was thinking about this interview beforehand, I wanted to ask you about this kind of what I would perceive to be a tension between business and a business-minded approach and this kind of heart-led approach, which feels very much like Eve. And then I kind of caught myself in the framing of that question, and I was like, I've set that up as a binary, right? Like I've already set that up like those two things are in opposition, which I don't think is necessarily true, but it feels often like they are. So can you just chat about how you think about the fact that you are a business person, a businesswoman, but also working in this space that is so clearly driven by, like you say, community values of helping people? Like how do these things live within you? How do you think about their relationship?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it is something that's really important to me. Like I said, there are aspects of what Eve is in terms of the values of it that if they weren't there, I wouldn't want to do it. One of the words that is not on my list there is entrepreneur. It's not like I'm just about I need to start a business and build it and I'm just looking for whatever's the next big thing and just about making money. That's just not it for me. It is a beautiful and exciting experiment in some ways to hold those things together, to be like actually genuinely about community and to really, really care for people and to invest my values and my heart in this business, which I also am excited about making a successful business and doing it well, and for it to be something that even just on a business level is healthy and successful. So I kind of like the challenge of those playing together. And I also feel like if they can't, then something's wrong. And I think in the world overall, something is a bit wrong. Like I think the fact that they don't sit well together and that it does feel like a binary, I think is part of the problem in the world right now. And so I'm excited to be one of the people who are out there going, what if they can be done together, and to sit in the points of tension and sit in like where it feels like they're coming up against each other and go, okay, I don't want it to be either or here. How can it be both? And so I mean, I definitely don't think I'm doing it perfectly at all, but I am committed to sort of staying in that zone and playing with it. And
And you feel that in the space, because I feel like you're playing in that wellness space. There is such a temptation, I would imagine. There are so many people doing what looks like positive, holistic wellness work that is not. That is completely cynical and is really the exact opposite. And you feel the difference. Like it's not I don't know how. I think it's a constellation of micro things, but I think people feel that authenticity or not.
Yeah.
Intuitively.
I love to hear that, because that's something that I grapple with. And I think more and more that even some of the words that really represent what matters so much to me and to the way that Eve is as a business are also being used all over the place. Yeah. Like even just community. Pretty much every yoga studio, every gym, every fitness space would be talking about, our community, and they talk like that. And some are doing it beautifully, but not everybody is. And same, like, body positivity or self-acceptance or self-love or any of those kinds of things, where they're co-opted and just purely as a way of getting people in the door, I find it yeah. I find it hard. It is icky.
It's fucking icky.
And I find myself kind of going, are we just doing the same? But I love to hear for you that it feels different, and that's all I can kind of go on. That's like, okay, well, the words might be the same, but it isn't about the words. Like the words are only ever going to, they're always limited to an extent. So yeah.
The words might get you in the door, but if you're not walking the walk once you get in there. But it's frustrating when words that are describing something that is good and of value are co-opted as buzzwords. Like we see it a lot. We work in corporate work a lot with illustration stuff, and so you do a lot of like illustrating of corporate values. So it's like everyone's doing integrity, everyone's doing authenticity, and then they're like, okay, let me do authenticity at you.
Yeah.
My dog's name's Petey, and you're like, this is not like
innovation.
Yeah,
and you're like,
right?
innovation's not getting fucking a plastic vertical garden inside your
I can
kitchen
draw you
area.
all the light bulbs you want, and you can put that poster up in your office. It's not going to make a lick of difference. But it's interesting, I imagine, like operating within that industry and that even the word wellness, right, has like now makes me kind of
bit spewy.
Like step back a little bit. Like wellness, that's good. We want to be well. We want wellness.
Yeah.
But because it's so, I mean, I guess it's kind of the horror of being a woman operating in the world is that all of these things are used against us to make money, to make us feel terrible about ourselves, and that has become part of that industry. So I wonder, do you feel that tension with does it come up with other businesses or the industry that you're in? As there's the one element of just working with the people who come to the studio and making sure that you're living your values and your promise, which you do beautifully. But navigating the broader world of the industry, what's that like?
Yeah. It's a funny one because I think in some ways I feel a bit disconnected from the industry, and even just the idea that it is an industry, the wellness industry feels kind of icky to me in itself. But I'm not too sure how to answer that. I guess there are times where connecting with, say, other people who own studios, where it will be like at the surface we're sort of talking the same, and there is that connection of we value the same things, and then it sort of becomes evident, oh no, we have quite different values when you dig in a little bit deeper. And so I guess for me it's partly been just about really kind of finding those kindred spirits within the industry where I can, and that's been beautiful to have people where it's like, oh, you really are doing community. I can tell you really care about your clients, or the way that you're doing things, or like you really are authentic. You're not just authenticity on your website or whatever. But then otherwise, I don't know. I think maybe I just sort of go, we'll just do what we do and let the industry do what the industry does and not worry too much.
Do you feel like maybe it's easier to operate in that world because maybe you're in the business of community more so than in the business of like fitness, for example? I don't know. Just a thought.
Easier to operate in what world?
In the within the fitness world, you're like, it doesn't really come up that much. I find a few kindred spirits, but it sounds like it's not a big tension for you, and maybe because where your sort of like heart and identity sits is as a community builder rather than a gym.
Yes, totally. Yeah, I think that is definitely a big part of it. But then I do have times though where I, because at Eve, a bunch of our teachers, most of our teachers, also teach in other spaces, other gyms. And so I'm always sort of hearing about what different places are doing and what the experience is like for people who are employed in these different places or contracting to these different places. And I do, like, sometimes I hear things where, particularly in yoga spaces, to be honest, where it is like there's that binary that you were talking about, Alice, of there's the business side and then there's the heart or the values side. And it almost sometimes can seem like there's, for the business owners, it's almost like this Jekyll and Hyde kind of presentation where when they're talking about the yoga classes that they're offering or the space that they have, it's like all love and light, kind of all beautiful. But then when it comes to actually operating the business, sometimes it can be like quite harsh and quite cutthroat or quite just where the values seem to kind of go out the window. And I guess in times like that, I kind of am like, oh, like I'd love to kind of connect a little bit more and kind of like go, well, what part could I play maybe, or could any of us who are sort of trying to integrate values and business together in a meaningful way, like how could we kind of feed into this industry in some way to help people to do that? Because I think it is partly just that it hasn't been very well modelled. People don't know how to do values and business well together, or heart and business. And yeah, so I don't know if that's making any sense.
Yeah, perfect sense.
It completely, I think to that idea of modelling it, I just wanted to kind of note that I think that that's a huge piece of it, because I don't work in the same space, but I think within the arts there's a similar false binary between the two. And I think I know in myself, having bought into that binary for years, how I've gotten in my own way doing that. And it's so helpful seeing examples of people participating within an economy in a way that is ethical and also still creative or still heart-led and still embodies those values, while also building a business that's a healthy thing that can exist in the world and support them and support other people. Literally, it's sometimes the thing to do is just doing it well, and being visible. And I think it's why I felt so excited about having this conversation. It's just fucking possible. Like, it doesn't, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's just to know that that's a way you can choose to live in the world.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, there are a million podcasts about fucking entrepreneur, like where that is held up as the value. And just thinking about when you said earlier that you chose to not put that in your list, I just think like there's this cult of the entrepreneur at the moment. And it's like the idea that it's just that we need to respect someone for building a thing just to sell the thing. Like, but there's so much shit in the world already. I'm like, that's not inherently something I need to respect, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. And don't you want to build, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, it's fine. But like building something that you want to hold on to, wouldn't that feel better than building something you want to let go of? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm obviously not an entrepreneur. But it's not inherently bad. But I agree. It's this sort of like gross thing. It's like, pumping out plastic toys over building something beautiful that you want to keep for the rest of your life. I find it
incredibly cynical. Like, I really do, and maybe that's too reactionary of me, but like, I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of bored of that story. I'm like, okay, cool.
Sure.
But
yeah. And I'm sure there's a whole spectrum of things that are valuable and things that aren't within that.
Much more diplomatic response. I'm like, fucking burn it down.
Just looking after our entrepreneur listeners.
Hashtag hustle, hashtag.
Well, on that, actually, Annie, I was listening to your last podcast episode, which was just before Christmas. This reminded me, Alice, of the hustle and grind thing. Yeah. And it was basically about managing burnout. I think you framed it as retaining your vitality or something along those lines through that season. And burnout is something that I have definitely struggled with at various times over the years.
Yeah.
And you mentioned there were a few times where you had been really burnt out. One was, when you moved studios to the second studio is what I was about to say. That doesn't make sense. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
We relocated the first one. Yeah.
And I'd love you to talk to some of that stuff you were speaking to a little bit about how, like, what you sort of learned from those experiences and how you manage your time and your energy now, because I am someone who can definitely find that the hustle or the like, I'm going to work really hard and get this thing done, like, quite seductive. Like I like the energy about that. I like, and there's something that I find quite alluring about that thing, but then I obviously end up hating it, and myself and my relationships go to shit and everything is bad.
Yeah.
But at the start, when you've got the bubbly, sparkly feeling, it can be really easy to let that take over everything, and then all of a sudden you're just a husk of a woman.
Yes.
So how do we not become husks, Annie Carter?
Well, as a recovering husk. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was, I've had a couple of key points in life that I would label as burnout. And that time relocating the studio was a really intense time, and I was excited about it and totally everything that you just said. I'm like, yes, it is really alluring, and I love feeling strong, and I love feeling like someone who can do stuff and who has a can-do attitude and that can hustle, #hustle and grind and all the things. That's been something that I've kind of, to be honest, like prided myself. Yeah, prided myself on. Thank you. Through most of my life. And it's not something that I'm like now, oh no, that's suddenly not part of me. But that experience in that time, so leading up to opening the new space, I was doing heaps of it, partly just because of money, like just a limited budget. And so was literally like painting walls and laying floors, and like there were just some really, really intense days, and really, really like burning the candle at both ends. And also in the middle of it, Abdo, my partner, had an accident where he cracked his head open and ended up in the hospital, and with bleeding brain. And so that was obviously took some toll emotionally as well. So it was just like a really big time that I just kept pushing through, because I was like, we have a deadline, need to get this space open, need to get out of the other space because that lease is coming to an end. And so there were all these sort of drivers just pushing forward. And a huge part of it is my inner drive, because I can do it. But that was a really, really profound experience of feeling like a husk. At the point that the studio opened, I was so happy and so excited to welcome people into it and to see it come to life. But I also was really, really exhausted. And it was one of those times where I just had to weigh up or had to really confront what I had done to myself to kind of get to that point, and that I was really tired. My body was physically like exhausted. And I think probably the biggest thing that I noticed was my memory disappeared for a while and my creativity disappeared for a while. I just felt like I couldn't retain information and I had no spark of ideas. And as I said before, like I'm someone who has ideas. Like I dream things all the time. I'm always like, oh, what's next? And that's the bit that I do connect with the entrepreneur thing. Like I like of constantly like starting something. Like I love that. But all of that just really went away for a good year after that. And I, at that time, just really made myself a promise. Like, I'm just not going to do that to myself again, because as beautiful and as cool as it was to open this awesome space and for that to go well and everything like that, there was also this kind of real tax on that in my body that overall was unacceptable to me. Like it was more than it should have been, and took a while to pay back in lots of ways.
Were you aware of it? Was this realization happening in real time? And then kind of what do you do if someone finds themselves in a moment where this is happening and there's also a reality of quite a long tail? Like you're like, oh fuck, I'm in it, but also this is going to take 6 months to a year to get out of.
Yeah.
And you realize you're at the bottom of your petrol tank. And like on one hand, you're like, fuck, I need to tap out. I can't keep going. But also sometimes like you have to.
Yeah. That's really hard. So in that experience, I was somewhat aware that was happening in the busy time leading up to opening the studio. But I guess I was so connected with the part of me that has always been able to push through and to keep on going and to pay for it later. Like and I think, and I don't know, maybe it's partly I'm getting older that my body doesn't give as much without needing the kind of care along the way. But so in that time it was some awareness of it, but it was only when I stopped, when the studio was open and I sort of had a chance to kind of really be like, okay, how am I? That it was like, whoa, that was too much. And then that took a while to start to feel okay again. And that was a bit like then we're into this new studio with a whole lot of new challenges about it, new awesome fun things about it too. But it wasn't like I could just, okay, I'm taking 6 months off. It was like I'm in. So I think that's probably part of why it took a good year for things to start to kind of feel okay again, in a way that I probably am the only one that could notice.
Yeah.
Like I think I probably I was fine. It's not like I was not fine at all, but there was definitely something not completely fine. And I guess I had what was amazing was to have the opportunity then when we opened the next studio, which I really considered hard before deciding to do it because of the experience of what I just described. And I went into that one going, I will only do this if I can do it in such a way that I do not burn myself out. And I pretty much went into it like that this is a top priority, that I get to opening this studio feeling well and feeling energized and excited and just all the things that were not quite there with the previous one. And so that meant just paying attention much more and not racking up that kind of debt to myself. Like when I started to feel like I'm heading in that direction, I would do whatever I had to do to kind of, if I'm talking in those terms, like pay that debt quickly. So have the weekend off, which doesn't sound that revolutionary, but like in these moments it is.
Yes.
Like, or put the phone down and have the night off, or make sure that I am eating well, or like I was just like, I am not going to sacrifice my own movement practice and my meditation practice during this time. Like if those things go, because they're often the things that do go when you get really busy, it's like that actually for me is now going to be a sign that things are not going okay. Like just in the same way as while we're doing this renovation and fit out of this studio space, if like a wall fell down or we couldn't get the paint that we need or something like that, would be signs that this thing is not going according to plan. So would it be a sign that things are not going according to plan if I'm wiped out and exhausted? It's like that, it was just as important, which was a great experience because it worked. Like I got to open the studio and felt like I did that okay. And now I'm just like, I'm committed to it in life. Like I want to live like that. Yeah.
That's amazing. That really, and it's quite simple, but I found it like mind-blowing listening to that podcast episode when you were saying exactly that, using something like, oh, I don't have time to meditate today, rather than being like, oh, well, shit, I'm busy, I don't have time to meditate today, that becomes the signifier that something is wrong. And then you go, okay, stop work.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at like what's gone wrong in this schedule, what's gone wrong in building this wall. Where has the mistake been made?
Yeah.
Rather than just pressing on, and then one day becomes 3 days, becomes 7 days. So using understanding what your non-negotiables are and then using them as the marker for how things are progressing.
Yeah.
We
Revolutionary.
so
Right. Well, yeah, it works. I felt like that in myself.
Yeah.
And it was like, and it actually worked, like it, in the sense that it carried me through that time in a much healthier way than the last time. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we so often treat that stuff as the shock absorber.
Yes.
It's like, oh, that's the buffer between, there's the stuff that actually matters, like work or whatever people put in that basket. And then there's the outside world and real life and all the stresses. And then there's the stuff for me that's just going to be the buffer between those two things. It'll absorb a bit of the shock. But yeah, you're right. Like that's the warning. That's the canary in the coal mine. It's information and it matters. Like let the alarm bell sound at that point rather than waiting for it to get worse.
Yeah. And it's just a picture of the kind of, thoroughly messed up system that we're in, that getting the thing done, getting the business up and running or building the project or whatever is held in as the important thing, and that our sense of being okay in ourselves is not. Like it's just like we've just got things really, really kind of upside down in lots of ways. Yeah.
I'm interested, Annie, and it's a theme that's come up a few times with a number of different people, of that sort of what got you to here. They're like, yes, I can. Of course I can. I'm strong. I can do it. They got you so far in life, at some point can become detrimental. And then that's really hard to, like, not the whole thing, but parts of it, right? Of being like, okay, maybe I don't ask for help. Maybe I don't slow down. Maybe I don't take the breaks when I need to. Finding the balance between holding on to the good parts of things, like having ideas, having energy, liking being strong, liking doing stuff yourself, being a relentless optimist. How have you found trying to like hold on to all of the golden parts of that while letting go of some of the parts that maybe don't serve you anymore, when you know that, you can attribute a lot of your success to those things?
Yeah. Whew. That's big.
Yeah.
And I think that will be my life's challenge.
Yeah.
In some ways. Yeah. And I think that shows up for me in that I don't ask for help very well. I don't show vulnerability very easily in some ways. These are things that I have to work on, because that other way of just I can do it, I'm strong, I've got this, all of that has served me really well in lots of ways. And it isn't something that I want to completely let go of, because it does continue to serve me in lots of ways. But I guess it is about just, I don't know, trying to bring some balance to that, and knowing that even if I can do all the things that I don't have to, and that sometimes it's best not to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually choosing, I guess, to be soft when I could be strong sometimes, and choosing to not do when I could do, and those kinds of things. Choosing to ask for help when I could do it myself. And they're all like challenging things for me, but they also, with so much of what I do, it's like I'm trying to be the change I want to see in the world, you know? It's like I don't want us to live in a world where it's all just like we all just have to hold ourselves and do everything for ourselves and push through and all of that. I don't want to be in a world that values only that kind of grind and grit and all of that. I want to be part of a world where people also rest and where we soften in ourselves and where we dream and where we take time and have silence and space and all of those kinds of things. And so, yeah, sometimes I'll just try to do some of those things that don't come as naturally to me because I think it's part of how I want us to be.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Part of your community service.
Well, yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
And partly because I look around and I don't see it being modelled that much. And so I'm like, well, maybe if I can model it for someone, and it's a weird thing, isn't it? But sometimes I find that can be more motivating than just to do it just for me, like to kind of go, you know what, I want other people who I care about to feel like they can take a day off and that when they need to rest, that they should rest and all of those kinds of things like that. That's the world I want to live in and the thing that I want for the people I love. And so it's like, well, I can't just say that and then just be grinding myself and then tell them, oh, yeah, rest, you should do that, lovely. You know, it's like we've got to model this for each other.
That's so true because how are you going to believe, like how am I to believe that you believe what you're saying when you tell me it's okay to take, if I'm working for you, if you tell me it's okay to take a day off or that I should rest, but I never see you do it. I'm not going to believe that when you say that it's okay for me.
No.
Yeah.
And that's challenging. Like I'm doing that in my work and with my team. I have a team of managers and I literally am sometimes like I'm doing this more to show them than because I particularly am feeling it or, you know, wanting it for myself even sometimes. But yeah, I think it's important.
It is. It's sorry, you go, Alice.
This is linked to that, but I just wanted to know, how do you think about success?
As in like, what do I...
Yeah. I mean, I guess sort of building on those
success?
ideas because you obviously do give so much thought to the impact that you have on your team and on the community, and also kind of reflecting on you and your own processes and what you need. And I'd just be interested to know, like, kind of when you're building something, and obviously growth is part of that because the more you grow, the more positive impact you can have, while kind of balancing that with being the person that you want to be in the world and showing up and not turning into something else or not letting your business turn into something else. Like, how do you hold all of those at once?
I think for me, and maybe this sounds really like woo-woo, but it's, for me, I think success is me feeling deeply at peace and at ease and like in love, as in like kind of living in a place of love. And then the rest, like the business stuff and the goal setting and the setting, you know, run challenges I might set for myself or the whatever it might be, is kind of all play. And those things change at different times and will impact whether I feel those things that I was saying that feel like success for me, or like I feel at peace in myself and feel at ease in life. Like sometimes it's that I want to, it is about, you know, setting a really ambitious goal and really working hard for it and going for it. And that kind of feels like when I just have a quiet moment, I settle into myself, I'm like, I feel like me, like I feel at home, I feel good. Other times when it's just been all that, it's like, no, I need the rest or the space or the time, or maybe it's like I need the sense of service to others, or need the sense of looking after myself. Like they're all these different things, and I feel like they all are constantly moving. And so in some, like I don't really define success by any one of those things, because I do think that it just changes all the time, and So, I mean, they definitely can be markers of success in that particular field of like, okay, I have this goal for my business and we achieved that and great, I succeeded. But yeah, I don't know. For me, I think I find it helpful just to think of it all. It's just all kind of playing, and really it's about, do I feel at home in myself? Am I okay? Yeah.
I love that.
Oh.
What do you really love about yourself, Annie Carter?
Oh. That's a question, isn't it? I love about myself, I love my heart. I think I'm sincere. And yeah, it's a funny thing as you ask that, I'm just picturing during the last few years, and we've done a lot of online things at Eve, so a lot of online classes, and then we've also done like some teacher training courses that have included online components. And so I've spent a lot of time looking at my team online and also at myself online as I've edited things or uploaded things and things like that. And always with my team, I look and I'm like, oh, I love her, or aren't they amazing? Like just, oh, they're so sweet, or they're so strong, or they're so creative, or whatever it is. And it's been a really lovely experience to realize that actually when I look at myself also on the screen, I actually feel like I love her. Like she's got a good heart, you know, like when she smiles, she really means it. And yeah, like it's been a really, I feel a bit silly even saying that in some ways, but also, again, it's like this is the world I want to be in, where it's okay to be like, you know what, like I could also point out all the things that are not so great, of course, but I think that bottom line, I think I'm a person who cares about people, and I'm trying to do the best I can.
Yeah. How gorgeous.
Yeah. I first came across Eve through a friend of mine, Marianne, who works with you. And long before I'd ever walked into any of the studios, she just kept talking to me about this amazing boss that she has. And the love and the care and the way you make her feel was so moving. And I like eventually was just like, who is this bot? Like, who is this woman? And I think to know that yeah, I think it's amazing to have that impact in the world. And kind of through that, eventually I was like, what is this Eve place? And wanting to know more. But when you describe, it's almost like hearing the other side of that, like to hear you describe looking at your team with that love. I've heard a member of your team what it feels like for her to receive that. And I think it's a very beautiful thing.
That means a lot to me to know. Like, I love that. Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah. Shout out to Marianne. We love you.
We're probably coming close to wrap up time, but maybe as a way of closing, Annie, it strikes me that with a lot of this stuff that we've spoken about around how you manage yourself, how you manage your staff, how you manage the space and the members at Eve, is that the impact is big, but the individual actions are quite small sometimes. You know, it's a sign on the door. It's the way that you greet someone. It's the way that you arrange your staffing timetable, probably, you know, all sorts of kind of small actions that build up to have a big impact. So I wonder if there are a couple of small actions with big impacts you might want to leave our audience with.
Okay. Things that your audience can do.
Yeah.
Ooh. Yes. Can they be in any realm that I
Any
choose?
realm you like.
Okay.
Yeah. It doesn't, don't have to think of it as advice, maybe just things that have worked for you.
Yeah, sure. I think one would definitely be to have some time, some space in your life in some way. So to have just some point I know for me, it's where creativity comes. It's where dreams and ideas come when I am in silence and there's space for my mind to wander and all of that. So I know for me that I need that on like kind of a bigger scale. I need to have times where I get away and where I'm just, no TVs and none of any of that sort of stuff, but also just on a daily basis that I just need to make sure that there's time of space and even silence. So even if it's literally like I'm driving somewhere and rather than listening to the radio that I actually just turn it off for this time. So yeah, I think that's been I guess a relatively small thing that I think has a big impact because it just leaves a space for the big things to kind of start to show themselves. And I don't know, I could go in so many directions with this. The other one would be just to this is not a small thing, but just the practice of learning to accept yourself, I think is just so, so important, and to just, learn to be okay with yourself. And even if that is something like what I just described, not that I set out to do that as a practice, like it was just part of my work, but like to look at a photo of yourself and be like, hey, I like them, or like they're okay. Look at yourself in the mirror. I think that the ripple effect of that in your life and for others, because I think when we find that in ourselves, we just necessarily start to kind of care about other people and have a positive impact in the world. So yeah.
Maybe we can take a photo of the you are welcome, we already love you, and we'll share it with this episode, and people can have a little print or save it as their phone background or just check in with it, because it's just beautiful. We love you as you are.
Yeah, I think that as a self mantra is profound. Yeah. Love it.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you so much for your generosity and being here. And it's just, this conversation has been so nourishing. Thank you.
Thank you both.
And just before we sign off, Annie, where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me through my Instagram, which is @_Annie Carter, or my website, which is anniecarter.com.au. And then Eve is, you could look up evestudio.com.au, or same, you'll find Eve in Instagram too.
And Annie's podcast, Yes You, is gorgeous.
Thank you.
Alice has got your back.
Thank you. I've had a little hiatus, and I am just kind of about to kind of get going with it again. So thank you.
And there are plenty back episodes. So
yes,
there's plenty for people to get going with.
Thanks so much. And thank you so much for having me here. It's been such a lovely experience to chat with you both. And I've loved the episodes I've listened to of your podcast too. I feel like I've got to get into some of the back catalogue.
Don't go too early. The sound production has increased significantly over time.
Yeah, sure. We've got to grow.
Thank you. But also thank you, Jess. I just love you.
You too. Always and forever.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Annie. Thank you, Alice.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Imposter Syndrome Club. Please follow us wherever you find your podcasts. And if you're feeling extra kind, rate and review. Or if you got any insights or value from this, share with a friend.
You can also find us on Instagram @ImposterPod or online at impostersyndromeclub.com.